Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to have a little chat about the start collecting boxes that Games Workshop have announced for Space Wolves and for Thousand Suns. Now, the Thousand Suns one is actually quite interesting to me. There is something about it that is relatively unique, and it looks to be a decent box. The Space Wolves one is Primaris Space Wolves, and it is distinctly not interesting, but its complete lack of being interesting is one of the things that makes it a kind of interesting topic in a way that's it's getting very convoluted and complicated, but let's just take a look at it and I'll explain what I mean. So, that is the Primaris Space Wolves box. As you can see, you get a battle leader, otherwise known as a lieutenant, you get intercessors, and you get aggressors. Now, to be honest, as a start collecting box goes, it's not terrible. It's not awful, the value's pretty good, and it has upgrade stuff for Space Wolves. You know, the shoulder pads seem to be moulded. There are little things here and there on the intercessors themselves that denote them to be Space Wolves. The aggressors seem to lack that. I mean, there are shoulder pads, but in terms of the overall decoration of them, they seem to be pretty standard from what I can see. And of course, the battle leader is the one that came from Tooth and Claw. And he does look more Space Wolf than pretty much everything else on there, admittedly. The Fenrisian axe does help with that, obviously. The thing is, as a start collecting box goes, it's not bad. In terms of the content, it's not bad. The issue is that the Primaris start collecting stuff, and let's be honest, I'm amazed that this has taken this long to even have a start collecting thing for Primaris. Like, the rate at which Games Workshop has been pushing the Primaris line to become the primary Space Marine thing, which is almost a play on words and is not intentional. They're making Primaris the focus of the Space Marine range by far. They're essentially the replacement for the old Marines, which I know you don't like it, but that doesn't stop it being true. I'm amazed it's taken this long for a start collecting Primaris to arrive. The issue is that whilst this isn't a bad box, this could be literally any start collecting box for the Primaris version of Space Marines. All of the intercessors across all of the Space Marine chapters do the same thing. The aggressors do the same thing. The lieutenants do the same thing. There is very little in the way of war gear difference. When you compare this to the existing Space Wolves start collecting, the existing one has got it's got cavalry in it. It's got dudes literally riding wolves, which is the most Space Wolf thing you can have. In terms of making it different to other boxes, the Thunderwolf cavalry is way up there. If you look at the start collecting for Space Wolves and the start collecting for standard Space Marines, there is a difference. If you look at the difference between Deathwatch and Blood Angels, there is a significant difference. If you look at the Primaris start collecting Space Wolf box, and then you think, okay, well, what could we do for standard Space Marines? Well, the thing is, you're looking at what you could do with standard Space Marines. You're also looking at what you could do for Blood Angels and Dark Angels. The Primaris line is not varied enough to warrant having multiple start collecting boxes with different varieties of Primaris in them. At the moment, a standard Space Marine chapter has got like a whole wealth of things to choose from, and then if you go over to Blood Angels, they've got even more, and if you go to Dark Angels, they've got even more, and if you go to Space Wolves, they've got even more. Deathwatch is its own unique little thing off in the corner doing what it does, and nothing in the Primaris line properly reflects the difference between the various chapters, especially the ones that have their own codexes. There's nothing in the Primaris line that properly shows the difference between Space Wolves and Blood Angels, between Space Wolves and Dark Angels, between Dark Angels and Standard Space Marines. This start collecting Primaris Space Wolves box could literally be start collecting any Space Marine chapter. It could just be start collecting Primaris, and that would be it. The thing that's weird about this to me is that there are things on there that makes these Space Wolves. As I said, I think it looks like the shoulder pads are moulded. You do have like little bits of decoration here and there on the intercessors. The battle leader is definitely Space Wolf. If you then did a Blood Angels one, what would be the primary difference between that one and this one? it might have a different selection of units in, but the thing is, those units are still completely applicable to literally every single other Space Marine army. This is genuinely a thing that is... I mean, it's good if you collect Space Wolves, and it's good if you collect Primaris Space Wolves in particular, but the choice to do a Space Wolves start collecting Primaris box is weird to me, because you could simply sell a generic Space Marines one, and it would serve literally every other chapter. The only thing I can think is that they are going to release a bunch of these over the next few months, years maybe, where they cover every single Space Marine chapter. But the thing is, how do you even make them different enough, given that all of the Primaris stuff does exactly the same thing in every single chapter? The unique flavour of each chapter is essentially wasted when it comes to Primaris. It's weird because it's not a bad box. I would argue that it's not a terrible box. It's not like crappy value. You still make a decent saving. The force in there isn't going to be like an absolute waste of time on the tabletop. But why Space Wolves in particular when it could be any chapter? Because it's just Primaris stuff, and Primaris stuff is intentionally generic and flavourless. Nothing is done to really make them feel like the different chapters, so why specify Space Wolves for the first start collecting? Now, you could think to yourself, okay, well maybe it's because the other box is Thousand Suns. But, I mean... it's not like Thousand Suns only face Space Wolves, and it's not like they're being sold as like a double box where you get like an extra discount because, mortal enemies and all that. It's just a weird choice. Which, by contrast, this actually is a really nice box because it is 100% just Thousand Suns. You've got the Zangors, you've got the Rubric Marines, and you've got Ahriman, Arch Sorcerer of Tzeentch. That's one of the things I like about this box, actually, the fact that Ahriman is in it. It's a little bit strange, because when you look at all the other start collecting stuff for 40k, you've got generic HQs in there for the most part. Yes, there is Captain Artemis for the Death Watch, but when it comes to heavy hitters lore-wise, when it comes to storied characters, heroes or villains of Warhammer 40k, Ahriman is pretty far up there, let's be honest. He's pretty high in the rankings. When it comes to influential people in Warhammer 40,000, his name is not one that should be anywhere close to the bottom of the list. He is significant. He is a significant character. And this is the first time we've seen a properly significant, heavy lore character show up in a start collecting box. And I was confused by that. Honestly, I was, because I was like, well... God damn, you're throwing in like a named character like Ahriman into start collecting, and then someone pointed something out to me. It's because there is a distinct lack of new HQs for Thousand Suns that don't come in boxes of 3. If you wanted to do a generic sorcerer, you can't buy those separately, can you? You can only buy them in sets of 3. It's the same system that the Custodies use for Captain Generals and all of that stuff. You can build all of the various units from 2 or 3 boxes of Custodies because they come with other stuff. This is exactly the same situation with Thousand Suns. When putting together the start collecting box, I genuinely feel like there must have been a moment where someone went, oh, hang on, we don't have an HQ we can put in here. We don't have a single HQ. We can't give away 3 sorcerers because that would make it even better value, and the value's decent, but maybe that would be a bit over the top, and that would also mean throwing in 3 HQ choices in boxes that typically have 1, maybe 2 at a push. I think the Necron one has got 2 if you take the Lord out of the vehicle. It's like a weird thing where I think maybe in some specific examples, not selling a single HQ leaves you in a weird position whereby you have this start collecting box that is unique amongst all the others because you have this insanely influential, powerful HQ, like a proper, full-on named character like Ahriman showing up in this box can only be the result of there not being anything else to pick, because it does not fit at all the trend of the start collecting boxes. It is so far above in terms of what the HQ is generally worth. it's so far above the others. I mean, if we're just talking points-wise, Ahriman is not a cheap HQ. When you look at the other stuff in the other boxes, it's like, I'm struggling to think whether any of the other options actually really match him. Maybe the Tyranids Start Collecting box has got a particularly nasty HQ in it. I can't remember, but that's what stands out to me about this particular thing. I actually quite like the box. I do like the Thousand Suns one. I mean, you can't argue with Zangor's, Rubric Marines, and Ahriman. That is the most Thousand Suns combination I think you could possibly have. You couldn't have a Thousand Suns box without Rubric Marines for a start because, well, it's Rubric Marines. They make up so much of the Thousand Suns, you couldn't possibly have anything else in that box. But it was just one of those things where I was looking at it, I was like, that seems off, and I can't think why. Oh, it's because it's got Ahriman in it, and none of the others got anything even remotely close to approaching a character of that importance in them. I mean, yeah, there's Artemis, but let's be honest, he's not exactly on the same level as, as the Chosen of Tzeentch, is he? A good box, an interesting box, but definitely I think maybe a situation whereby I won't say trend because it's not happening all the time. It's not like they do it constantly, but the idea of chucking in a bunch of different HQs in a box that also has troops or elites or whatever in it, custody style, maybe hasn't paid off long term because you're in this weird position now where it's just, I mean, looking at it, in fact, we can, we'll have a look at it now. So if we have a look at the Start Collecting stuff, you've got just Space Marine Captain in Terminator armor. You've got an Ethereal. You've got, what have you got in there? What is the HQ in that Demons of Slaanesh box? Is there one? There might not be one. I can't remember what that is, but not quite on the same level as Ahriman. You've got Captain What's-His-Name from the Blood Angels. If that's even counted as him, it might just be a generic captain using his model. I can't remember. Again, Space Wolves, nowhere near the same thing. Captain Artemis, yes. That maybe, but the rest of them, it's purely generic. Generic all the way through. There's absolutely nothing even remotely close to the man himself showing up in any of these boxes. Perhaps a rare case then of Games Workshop suddenly finding that they don't quite have the options that other armies have when it comes to putting that particular box together. I mean, to be honest, both of those boxes look decent. They don't look terrible. The value seems okay. And the Thousand Suns one especially, I do like the composition of it. How effective it is, I don't know. But you cannot argue that it is not 100% Thousand Suns. The one that is the most just kind of is the Primaris one, and that's only because you can apply it to literally every other chapter. There's nothing uniquely Space Wolves about that box. The problem is that there's nothing uniquely any Space Marine chapter about that box, which is also why it would be much better served as just a generic Space Marine Start Collecting. Anyway, let me know what you think of those two boxes in the comments down below. Do either of them like tickle your fancy more than the other? Do you think that is genuine issue with the Primaris stuff where it's just everything does the same thing, and so how do you possibly flavour it properly and you could just apply it to literally everything? Or do you think that's a bit of a harsh viewpoint? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all that shit. Click it if you like, don't click it if you don't want to. And as always, there is a affiliate link in the description for Element Games, so if you're going to buy some 40k stuff, you can do it through that, and that gives me a little something, and you save some money on 40k stuff, and paint, and X-Wing, and War Machine, and Warhammer Hordes, and every other tabletop game, because they stock everything. So, yeah, you can do that if you like. You don't have to. It's entirely up to you. I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.